In 1936, the photographer Walker Evans traveled into rural Alabama and spent 3 weeks photographing 3 sharecropping families. And this is a portrait of Floyd Burroughs. For years, Burroughs and his family had worked in the cotton fields without any government subsidies or help. Evans was working for the Farm Security Administration, and he had a clear purpose in taking those photographs. He wanted to secure public empathy and sympathy for the tenant farmer's plight. But who was Floyd Burroughs? Is he somebody who's deserving of government aid? Somebody who's asking for support? This image invites our compassion, but other images of Burroughs show him as proud of his family thriving and growing, proud of not having accepted any charity or outside help. Now, these were questions that Americans would be asking during the Great Depression. Should the government be stepping up with work relief, direct handouts to needy citizens, subsidies for farmers, unemployment insurance, old age pensions, support for unions? Or were these things that undermined the self-reliance of the hardworking American who for years had made it on their own? How far should the government go to alleviate Depression-era suffering? Critics charge that New Deal reforms and regulations destroyed free market capitalism, setting the nation on a potential path toward socialism. But New Dealers themselves argued that they had saved capitalism by undermining any momentum towards a worker revolution, a violent revolution, to restore a sense of social justice in America. Floyd Burroughs is not just the face of suffering, but his passivity is also vaguely reassuring, and it's in stark contrast to the angry outbursts of other workers in other parts of the country who threatened to foster a revolution, not just wait for aid that might not come. Okay. Did relief undermine a person's willingness to work, creating a permanent underclass that would always depend on charity to survive? Or did it create a safety net to deserving citizens who needed some help to survive hard times? Did farm subsidies, Social Security, protection for unions offer a measure of social justice? Or did they create a permanently big government with just too much power? Now, why does this period matter in American history? It's probably hard to appreciate this, but the New Deal only lasted for 5 years. But in those 5 years, we really saw perhaps the most important legislative period in American history, with an array of laws and reforms passed that completely transformed the role that American government played in American society. Before 1932, a stroll down Main Street or a visit to a private home would have unearthed little evidence of the role of the federal government in the private lives of Americans. But after 1932, the situation could not have been more different. By the end of the decade, the American landscape was dotted with highways, bridges, campgrounds that public works projects had constructed. The elderly were receiving their first Social Security checks. Unions had protection for organizing. Maximum working hours and minimum wages had been enacted for the first time. The federal government was playing a strong role, not just in regulating the economy generally, but in the individual lives of American citizens. Now, as you read this chapter, here are some questions that you should keep in mind. What problems did the nation face during the Depression? How did the New Deal build upon the progressive agenda and goals? And what was the long-term versus short-term significance of the New Deal?